Yeah, certainly a moment of high drama in this case, Anna. I think we do have a partial verdict from the jury. Just to explain what's happened in the past 10 minutes or so, the judge received a note from the jury room. The attorneys from both sides, from the government and from Sean Diddy Combs' defence team, gathered in that room together. Sean Combs had his head in his hands. The government's prosecution team seemed pretty unemotional. The judge then read out a note saying the jury has reached a partial verdict. So just to recap, Sean Diddy Combs faces 5 separate criminal counts: 1 count of racketeering, 2 counts of sex trafficking and 2 counts of transportation for prostitution. Well, the most serious of those charges is count 1. That's the racketeering charge. This jury says that they've not been able to reach a verdict on that charge. They say that's due to some of the jurors being unpersuadable on that charge. However, they do say they have a verdict on the 4 other charges, so the sex trafficking charges and the transportation for prostitution charges. The sex trafficking charges alone carry a sentence of a minimum of 15 years to life. So those are very serious charges in and of themselves. What's not clear yet is whether this judge is going to accept a partial verdict from the jury. He has asked both the defence team and the prosecution team to provide him with their views, and then he will make a decision. But certainly a hugely dramatic moment in this case. Sean Diddy Combs, the man who rose from relatively humble beginnings. He grew up in Harlem, New York, not 10 miles from this courthouse. He spent the last 10 months in prison awaiting this trial. He now faces the possibility of spending the rest of his life in prison. It could be that we hear at least a partial verdict from this jury in the coming minutes and hours. It's really a wait and see at the moment, Anna.
And what has Combs' lawyers said his defence is? Because he has acknowledged that at times he was violent in domestic relationships, even saying if he was charged with domestic violence, we wouldn't all be here.
Yeah, exactly. You know, they can't really deny that he was violent in these relationships, because there is a video that's been played numerous times to this jury which shows Sean Combs in the corridor of a hotel room in Los Angeles, apparently dragging his then girlfriend Cassandra Ventura, who was a pop star. He was in a relationship with her for more than a decade, and he was very clearly physically beating her in this disturbing footage which this court has been shown on many occasions. So his defence team say, no doubt about it, this is a flawed individual. This is a man who was violent in these relationships that he had. But the prosecution case is that he forced and coerced his partners into having sex with male prostitutes in these drug-fuelled parties that he referred to as freak-offs. Well, Sean Combs' defence team says that simply isn't true. He says that these women were willing participants in these sex marathons. They say that this was simply Sean Combs' private life, which has been turned into a crime scene. Interestingly, though, Anna, while the prosecution case lasted 28 days, 35 different witnesses on the stand, the defence case lasted just 25 minutes. Much of their case, in fact, was centred on the cross-examination of the witnesses, particularly the 2 key women in this case, Cassandra Ventura, Cassie, who is the former pop star, and a woman who testified under the pseudonym Jane. They said that these women were motivated by money, by financial gain, and in fact they had been in consensual relations with Sean Combs.
The early part of this trial was hearing from his former girlfriend, Cassie Ventura. Now, what was the case that she made against him?
Yeah, really, this whole case hinges around Cassie Ventura. She was the one who filed a civil lawsuit against Sean Combs back in 2023. They settled that case out of court extremely quickly. She received $20 million, but that allowed the government to then launch this investigation into Sean Combs. And as such, she has been the star witness for the government's case. She took the stand very early on. She was one of their first witnesses. And I think she was particularly...
I didn't realise there was a better way to get my education.
She took the stand very early on. She was one of their first witnesses. And I think she was particularly affecting, Anna, because she was so heavily pregnant when she took the stand. In fact, she gave birth just a week after giving testimony here. I spoke to a seasoned trial lawyer at the time about her evidence, and they said that she was the most heavily pregnant witness that they can ever remember giving evidence in a criminal trial. But her testimony was about her evidence, and they said that she was the most heavily pregnant witness that they can ever remember giving evidence in a criminal trial. But her testimony was incredibly disturbing at times. She detailed this more than a decade-long relationship she had with Sean Combs. They met when she was still a teenager. At the time, she had a hit pop record. She was signed to his music label for a 10-album deal. Well, in the end, she only ever released one other album. She says her job became satisfying his every sexual desire. Much of the prosecution case centred on how in the end, she only ever released one other album. She says her job became satisfying his every sexual desire. Much of the prosecution case centred on how she was forced to partake in freak-offs. These were the drug-fuelled sex marathons where she alleges she was forced to have sex with a number of male escort sex workers. Sometimes these sessions would last days and the participants would have to have IV drips in order to recover afterwards. She said that with male escort sex workers, sometimes these sessions would last days and the participants would have to have IV drips in order to recover afterwards. She said that their relationship was characterized by a major power and wealth imbalance. She said not only did he coerce her into sex, but that he regularly beat her. She said, in fact, on one occasion, he beat her so severely, major power and wealth imbalance. She said not only did he coerce her into sex, but that he regularly beat her. She said, in fact, on one occasion, he beat her so severely that she had to be hidden in a hotel room in order to recover from her into sex, but that he regularly beat her. She said, in fact, on one occasion, he beat her so severely that she had to be hidden in a hotel room in order to recover from her.
Verdict from the jury in the Sean Diddy Combs trial. Casey, we have a verdict. We have a verdict from the jury. In the Sean Diddy Combs trial, we're told they sent a note just a few moments ago that the jury has reached a verdict on counts 2, 3, 4, and 5. They are unable to reach a verdict on count 1 as we have jurors with unpersuadable opinions on both sides. Now to break that down, count 1 is RICO, the most complex charge here that could come with up to life in prison. The remaining charges include the 2 counts of sex trafficking, 1 for each victim, Cassie Ventura and a pseudonym named Jane, and the last 2 in terms of translation into the form of prostitution. So we now know that on the RICO charge, it appears that the jury presently is hung. We do not yet know what the verdict is in the remaining counts, but suffice to say, over the last 7 weeks, the prosecution has been trying to persuade a jury of now 12 people, with the alternates out, that Sean Diddy Combs should serve the rest of his life in prison based on 5 felony counts. Now, the jurors are not to consider in any way, shape, or form the potential sentence, but this is serve the rest of his life in prison based on 5 felony counts. Now, the jurors are not to consider in any way, shape, or form the potential sentence, but this is huge. We are now the second day of deliberations. It has been a little more than, 10, 12 hours of deliberation, including notes, lunch breaks, and an overnight deliberative process. And here we have right now all these notes in between. We are waiting for the verdict, but also the judge to make a decision on count 1 and whether they should continue to deliberate, given called with the Allen charge, meaning go back and deliberate until you are most convicted, but also the judge to make a decision on count 1 and whether they should continue to deliberate, given called with the Allen charge, meaning go back and deliberate until you are most assuredly and precisely and finally hung. But according to these jurors, count 1, the RICO charge, appears to be the one where they do not have unanimity among the 12.
Yeah, Laura, let me...
Jurors, count 1, the RICO charge appears to be the one where they do not have unanimity among the 12.
Yeah.
Jurors, count 1, the RICO charge appears to be the one where they do not have unanimity among the 12.
Yeah, Laura, let me...
Transportation for purposes of tampering, forced labor, sex trafficking, transportation for purposes of prostitution, and drug distribution. You know, yesterday we did receive a note from the jury asking about drug distribution, wanting that law reread to them. This is very interesting. Tampering, forced labor, sex trafficking, transportation for purposes of prostitution, and drug distribution. You know, yesterday we did receive a note from the jury asking about drug distribution, wanting that law reread to them. This is very interesting. They've been deliberating for almost 2 days. We know that they have reached a verdict from the jury asking about drug distribution, wanting that law reread to them. This is very interesting. They've been deliberating for almost 2 days. We know that they have reached a verdict on those other counts that you spoke of. And what are those counts? Well, those are 2 counts of sex trafficking. One when it pertains to Cassie Ventura, his girlfriend of about 11 years, who claims that Combs forced her to participate in drug-fueled sex parties known as freak-offs. Prosecutors have to prove force, fraud, or coercion when it comes to those charges. The other one pertains to Jane. Now, that is not her real name. She testified under a pseudonym. She actually dated Combs up until his arrest in fraud or coercion when it comes to those charges. The other one pertains to Jane. Now, that is not her real name. She testified under a pseudonym. She actually dated Combs up until his arrest in September. And there are those 2 counts of the Mann Act, transportation to engage in prostitution. We heard from several escorts taking the stand. We know that Combs paid for those escorts on some of his own credit cards. And the question is, did he use company money to pay for some of those acts? Also, this is very interesting. The judge is now asking the jury to go back and deliberate. He has told them something called an Allen charge, right? Where he wants them to go back again and try to continue to deliberate. But we know from this note that there is more than one juror who is, as of right now, unwilling to change their position. Now, something that's really interesting again and try to continue to deliberate. But we know from this note that there is more than one juror who is, as of right now, unwilling to change their position. Now, something that's really interesting here is that I was in that courtroom almost every single day, and I had my eyes on those jurors. And I have said all along that I did not think that they would reach a unanimous verdict on RICO. Something that's really interesting here is that I was in that courtroom almost every single day, and I had my eyes on those jurors. And I have said all along that I did not think that they would reach a unanimous verdict on RICO. That is because something that's really interesting here is that I was in that courtroom almost every single day, and I had my eyes on those jurors. And I have said all along that I did not think that they would reach a unanimous verdict on RICO. That is because of them appear to look they would reach a unanimous verdict on RICO. That is because during some of the testimony from the prosecutor's witnesses, remember they called 34, several of them appeared to look not an agreement with the prosecution, some smirking, some appearing to roll their eyes during different testimony. So we knew that this was always going to be difficult for them to reach a unanimous verdict. Now, when I was in there for closing arguments, Mark Agnifilo, one of Combs' defense attorneys, his lead defense attorney, delivering closings on Friday, and at one point eliciting laughter from the jurors and the courtroom. He said that one of Combs' defense attorneys, his lead defense attorney, delivering closings on Friday, and at one point eliciting laughter from the jurors and the courtroom. He said that Cassie is actually the winner here, that she was one of Combs' defense attorneys, his lead defense attorney, delivering closings on Friday, and at one point eliciting laughter from the jurors and the courtroom. He said that Cassie is actually the winner here, that she was the one that walked away with a $20 million settlement. Remember, this all started when Cassie Ventura filed that explosive civil. Said that Cassie is actually the winner here, that she was the one that walked away with a $20 million settlement. Remember,
what the hell's going on with juror five questions? They're very interesting. What the hell's going on with juror 25? Just as point of clarification, the jurors have their numbers from voir dire, so it's not that they have 25 jurors, but like they have their numbers. It doesn't mean there's 25 jurors. There are 8 jurors, 8 men. Sorry, 12 jurors, 8 men, 4 women, and this guy's one of them. And the note out to the judge yesterday was, we have a juror, number 25, quoting here, who we are concerned cannot follow your honor's instructions. After conferring with the lawyers, the judge sent back in a note saying, do it, do it anyway. Like saying, I reviewed your note. I remind every juror of their duty to deliberate and their obligation to follow my instruction in the law. With that instruction in mind, please continue deliberating. And they did. What does that mean? This guy, veterinarian, 51, Hispanic, PhDs in macroeconomics and something else, molecular biology, I think, has a domestic partner who's male and who is a graphic designer, lives in New York, goes to the opera, watches nature documentaries, may or may not be climate change, they said. And I don't know what to make of this. He doesn't sound like somebody who can't speak English, who can't understand things. He definitely can follow the instructions. So what do you glean from this? Matt, I'll start with you.
Well, first of all, it's the worst nightmare for any prosecutor when you've got a comment from the foreperson right away, a note to the judge that somebody's not deliberating. My guess, Megan, just from a whole bunch of jury trials and a lot of speculation, since they didn't give us anything else, is it sounds like he went back and announced his verdict. If I had to guess, he went back and either said, I don't want to talk, I don't want to deliberate, this guy's guilty, or this guy is, I'm not convicting no matter what. That'd be my guess. He came in and very strongly announced an opinion at the very beginning, which prompted the foreperson to say, hey, you got to deliberate, dude. We got to talk about this. That's my guess. And I know getting notes like that, Art and I both probably have PTSD from many years of doing it. From the defense side, that's you love seeing that. From the prosecution side, you have a problem right at the outset. So hopefully they straighten it out. You agree with that, Arthur?
Well, in federal court, unlike in many state courts, in federal court, it is not as big of a problem as it is in the state court, because the judge has the power. I did all this research yesterday. The judge has the power to call that particular juror out, not ask him about what's going on specifically in the deliberation room, but the judge can make an inquiry. And if the judge determined that this juror cannot be a fair and impartial juror for whatever reason that didn't come out in voir dire, or I'll give you any other example, he gets deathly ill and can no longer deliberate. In federal court, the judge has the jurisdiction to rule that a criminal defendant can have a fair and impartial trial and a verdict with just 11 jurors. He can dismiss this juror for good cause and have 11 jurors deliberate. Trust me, the judge doesn't want that. The prosecutor does not want that, because it creates appellate issue. But there are appellate cases on point that says the judge has tremendous leeway at the end of a long trial like this, where so many resources have been spent. If a juror is unavailable or unable to be a fair and impartial juror at that point, the judge can dismiss them, and 11 jurors can go forward and reach a verdict.
Arthur, what do you make of Matt's theory? Because I had the same reaction as Matt did. Somebody saying, my mind's made up. There's no point in deliberating. I'm never moving off of insert verdict here. What, is that what you're, I mean, like we have no idea what we're talking about. The audience should know we are all totally speculating. But that's the fun of waiting for a jury. That's what we do. Go ahead.
I'll just speak for myself, and I'm usually wrong. I mean, I just did this, and we had, I don't know, a dozen notes, 15 notes, and I don't know what they're doing. But the jury is allowed to go in there and say, listen, I listened intently to all the evidence. I don't need any readbacks. I focused. I listened to every second, and I think he's not guilty of all counts. And, I'll sit here. You guys can talk all you want, but there's nothing you're going to tell me that the witnesses didn't tell me in direct examination, or I learned in cross-examination, that's going to change my mind. They're allowed to, you're allowed to do that as a juror. You can't say, I'm not going to find him guilty because he's a black man, and I think black men have been so demonized in society, so that's what my verdict is. You can't do that, because now you're not finding a verdict based on the evidence, which is what the judge's instructions are. But if you say, I listened to all the evidence and here's my verdict, and I'm not going to be threatened or beat up or convinced otherwise, he's allowed to do that. I was afraid when I heard that note that it was someone who didn't have the intellectual capacity, because in federal court, as you guys know,
that's not this guy's problem.
Right. There's not a lot of heavy voir dire in jury selection. The lawyers don't get to speak to the jurors in jury selection in federal court. So sometimes you don't realize there's a screwball in there based on a questionnaire that they filled out. But yes, it does not sound like he has the background where he can't. And it seems like maybe that ship has sailed. I mean, it's almost, it's the next day and they haven't sent back any notes like this guy's a big problem.
Right. Now they're deliberating. But now they sent out a question asking if, I don't have the exact wording in front of me, but basically asking if a person has drugs and gives them to another person because the other person asked for them, is that possession with intent to distribute, which is what he's charged with, is one of the many predicate acts for the RICO count. It's not a separate charge. I mean, I think we can all agree the answer to that is yes. It is. That is, you're toast. The answer is yes. So substantively, the answer back to the jury is basically good for the prosecution. But they didn't answer back to the jury like that, Matt. They just said, the judge is so annoying, I'm sure the jury's feeling it. He just said, oh, you have a question about my instructions? Please consult my instructions. And he did not add any other color to it. And then the most interesting note, that to me at least suggests, because if you look at the verdict form, I don't know how they're going after this. If you look at the jury instructions, they talk about the predicate acts, and they may just be going through the jury instructions. If you look at the verdict form, it starts with RICO, guilty or not guilty. And only if they check guilty, do they go on to have to consider each one of the predicate acts, including in possession with intent to distribute. So if they're just going off the verdict form, then that might tell us that they're on a guilty for racketeering. But if they're going off the jury instructions, then they might just be kicking around all the predicate acts before they get to guilty or not guilty on RICO. But anyway, there's some cause for hope from both sides. And then they get to the really interesting one, which was today, where they asked about testimony. They want testimony sent back into the jury room, and it's interesting. They wanted Cassie. Hold on, I'm trying to find. I have so many notes on my phone about the big beautiful bill. I'm trying to get back to the relevant texts. They wanted Cassie Ventura's testimony. I can't find it. They wanted
and Danielle Phillips, a sex worker who was hired for freak-offs, right?
They wanted information about what happened at the Hotel Intercontinental, which is where she was beaten in the middle of a freak-off and dragged back in there. All of that would seem potentially to be good for the prosecution, but again, we don't know. Crapola. Your thoughts on it, guys?
Well, having just done a 2-month trial and these notes.
The Harvey trial, just in case people are wondering now. It didn't go Arthur's way, but he did a great job.
It kind of went my way. We beat the 2 top counts. We did all right. It's up to the sentencing. We could go, if the judge sentences him the way he should be sentenced, then we went from 23 years to a lot better, and he could see the light at the end of the day, at least in New York. Anyway, what we ended the day with, after all the notes would come in, was who the F knows? Like, who the F knows? I mean, I've tried more cases than I can count, and I've been so wrong so many times. And then, we get to talk to jurors sometimes afterwards. And when you hear from them why they ask certain questions, you're just
horrified.
like, wow, I really don't know what I'm doing. Like they're thinking they're looking at things in such a different way than we do as lawyers, because they're electricians and school teachers and school bus drivers.
Okay, but wait, I don't mean to cut you off, but I do want to get to what they're asking about, because I think it's somewhat telling. Okay, the first one is Cassie Ventura's testimony regarding Intercontinental. Her testimony concerning the events at Cannes and those that immediately followed. Via USA Today, here was that testimony in part. A former assistant, Mia, she had testimony that in 2012, she witnessed a discussion between Combs and Cassie Ventura escalate at the premiere of the Brad Pitt film Killing Them Softly during the Cannes Film Festival. Claimed she saw Combs grit his teeth while digging his nails into Ventura's arm, eventually insisted that Ventura leave, which she did. At the festival, Ventura testified she got into an argument with Combs. He accused her of taking drugs from him. He kicked her off the boat they were staying on. She testified she returned to the U.S. on a commercial flight, trading seats with another passenger because she didn't want to sit next to him, but he switched too, ended up next to her. At that point, he pulled up the freak-off video on his computer, which she thought he deleted, played them on his laptop while others were around. She worried he was going to embarrass her and release them. I felt trapped. How do you get out of this? How do you get out of this situation? Ventura testified. When they landed in New York, they went to dinner. Combs told her he wanted to have a freak off, so they did. That was that one. Her testimony regarding freak offs with Daniel Phillip. And Daniel Phillip was this escort who said Ventura asked him, forgive me, audience, to urinate on her. She was the one who asked me to do it. She asked me if I'd done it before. She told me to do it. I was doing it wrong because they both told me that. Also said he witnessed Combs become violent with Ventura, leading him to experience erectile dysfunction for the first time. Asked me to do it. She asked me if I'd done it before. She told me to do it. I was doing it wrong because they both told me that. Also said he witnessed Combs become violent with Ventura, leading him to experience erectile dysfunction for the first time. Said, my thoughts were, this is a man with unlimited power. Even if I went to the police, I might still lose my life. He testified he heard Combs slapping Ventura behind closed doors and her screaming, I'm sorry, before she ran out nude to Phillip and jumped in his lap. He said he asked her why she stayed with him despite the real danger of doing so. None of this is great. This is not great for Sean Combs, guys. Your thoughts?
No, you don't want to hear that. I mean, you're the defense attorney and you hear this in the courtroom and you hear some of these readbacks. It's not fun. And your instinct is you want to jump up and you want to say something, you want to object, you want to counter argue, and you're not allowed to do anything except just sit there. So it's not a good time. It's not a good
It also
time.
sounds, Megan, like they're working through the sex trafficking. And what's interesting legally on that is, remember, sex trafficking is both a predicate for the RICO charge and also a substantive charge in its own right, but that requires force, fraud, or coercion. So those are pretty broad terms, and it seems to me that goes right to that issue. Are we talking about force? What is she afraid of? What's he making her do? So I think the encouraging thing for the prosecution in this is it appears like they're taking their task really seriously and that they're methodically going through the evidence, which is always something that you want to see after a long case like this.
They want to hear the part about him threatening her with the freak off video, the part about the escort hearing Diddy hit her behind closed doors, and how scary he was. I mean, I'd be worried right now if I were the defense, but again, huge
that's
caveat.
coercion. That goes to the coercion Matt was just talking about.
Since President Trump was sworn in, his administration has made enormous progress at a breakneck pace. But don't forget, while they are moving mountains for the good of the nation, you've got your personal savings to worry about.